Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the examination point of view. Let's take up today's articles. The articles which appear in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper are on our screens. Let's take up the first important article for the day. Now the first important article which appears reads Spectrum Auction bids worth rupees 1.45 lakh crore placed on day 1. Now which spectrum auction is being talked about? The 5G spectrum auction is being talked about in this article, where on July 26th, which was the date decided for the 5G auction to be held. So the auctions were held and day 1 saw bids for 1.45 lakh crore. So we can say that the spectrum, through the spectrum, the government is earning massive amount of money, that of 1.45 lakh crore. So in this backdrop, what becomes important for us to understand is what is first of all 5G, then what do we mean by 5G spectrum, what are the provisions for auction, and the important aspects related to the 5G network and spectrum. So let's start the discussion with that. First of all, what is 5G network? When we talk about 5G, which means that other 1, 2, 3, 4Gs were already present before 5G. So this is nothing but the generation which we say 5th generation. So G is generation in 5G. So 5G denotes the generation of connectivity that has been put out with respect to transmission of data. So when it was 1G, the first generation had certain speeds and certain efficiency of transmitting data from one point to another. So the latest mode of connectivity is the 5G connectivity, which talks about transmitting data with very high speeds and in a very short period of time between two mediums. So this is the 5G network. Now what is special about the 5G network? The 5G network is said to be of very high internet speeds. The internet speeds that we use right now range to around 1 Gbps, but the 5G speeds are said to be more than 20 Gbps, that is 20 gigabytes per second. What does this mean? That the internet or the data transmission would be able to transfer 20 GB of data per second. So that's a whopping speed. So this is the efficient and increased amount of speed that is being said that the 5G network will provide, and all our internet services will also experience that fastness. So and apart from this, the feature of 5G is called low latency. What do we mean by latency? Latency is what we face when our YouTube video buffers, right, where that the data is being transmitted but the speed is slow. So that is known as latency. So the 5G is now said to have ultra low latency, which would mean that this network, by having high internet speeds, the lag in the network would be very low. So the 5G network will have ultra low latency with it. So these are the features of the 5G network or connectivity that we are going to have. But are its uses only for what we envisage in our daily life, mobile usage, computer usage? When such high speeds is guaranteed in terms of connectivity, certain larger functions get active, that of Internet of Things or machine learning activities. What do we mean by Internet of Things? Now let's take the example of your room. Now your room has lights, fans, other appliances. Now for operating all of that, you have to switch a button for on and off. Now if I tell you that all of these appliances, the light, fan, devices, all of it can be operated via a single mobile phone or a single device, where they are connected with the internet or Wi-Fi, and a single device connects them and controls their switching on and off and controlling the appliances. How is this done? So this is the Internet of Things, where the internet would be connected with various appliances and using high speeds internet, this internet of things would become very much possible and very efficient. So the ultra high speeds and low latency of 5G does not just have applications in our daily lives, but things such as IoT, that is Internet of Things, and other such important and complex tasks that computers and supercomputers perform, which needs extreme high amount of speed, which would be possible by the network of 5G. So now after understanding 5G, what does happen then? So what is this spectrum and what is the auction that is happening? So when we talk about providing this speed, how does this speed get to us? So those mobile providers or internet service providers provide us with this network, but how are they traveling? These speeds travel through airwaves. This data is essentially traveling through airwaves, and these airwaves is nothing but a part of atmosphere above us that we have, that through which these waves will travel from the media. It is this airways which the government has control over, and it will grant these airways to the telecom operators and internet service providers. So the auction is happening for the airwaves that is going to be designated to these companies, and these companies are going to buy these airwaves from the government. And these airwaves, how do we decide which airwaves are going to be taken by the companies? So these airwaves are decided upon their frequencies. Those frequencies which would facilitate the highest transmission for the 5G network would have been decided by the government, and a total 72 gigahertz. When I say gigahertz, hertz is the frequency for hertz is the SI unit for frequency of a wave, and gigahertz is the measure of hertz that way. So a total 72 gigahertz of the airwaves are auctioned by the government, and these companies are now going to buy it. So let's understand what is a spectrum. The spectrum refers to the invisible radio frequencies that wireless signals travel over, and those signals are what enable us to make calls from our mobile devices, tag our friends on Instagram, call an Uber, pull up directions to a destination, and do everything on our mobile devices. So it becomes all of this becomes possible because the data is traveling through these invisible radio frequencies, and this data is transmitted, and all of these functions become possible then. The frequencies we use for wireless are only a portion of what is called the electromagnetic spectrum. Now the electromagnetic spectrum is a large spectrum which has a lot of other rays, UV rays, X-rays, infrared rays, visible light. In all of those electromagnetic spectrum, the waves which facilitate transmission of data are the radio waves. Radio waves are a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So radio waves are those waves which facilitate such data transmission. So the portions of electromagnetic spectrum are grouped in bands. Now these bands are of what are used to us depending on their wavelengths, that is the distance over which the wave's shape repeats. Now what is a wavelength? Let's say that this is a wave. Now the distance between the crest and the trough is known as the wavelength. Right? This is which means that this is a measure of length of a wave, which we call a wavelength. So these bands are distributed among themselves between various waves, and the cellular technology operates upon the radio spectrum, which includes frequencies of 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz. So for the cellular technology to operate, there is a specific band for this radio frequency which it facilitates, that is the 3 kilohertz to 300 gigahertz worth of frequencies. If the waves are traveling in these frequencies, that is when the cellular transmission of the data would become possible. And other parts of the spectrum carry broadcast radio and television or serve other everyday functions. So other than these frequency waves, there are also waves for television transmission or broadcast transmission, of which we see video on our television, right? So those also work on similar wave concept, but the frequency of those waves is different. Now coming to the auction, what are the different bands of these frequency waves that are there? right? So there are different bands of waves which are designated. So first is the low band spectrum, which means that these would have waves which would be lower in the frequency. Now if they are traveling in the lower frequency range, they would show certain characteristics, the data would get transferred in a certain speed. So there are certain uses, certain advantages and certain disadvantages of all the bands. So let us look at the uses of low band spectrum which would be there in the auction. A lot of companies would be purchasing this low band spectrum, right? So in this band the data travels longer distances with minimal signal interruption. So what is the advantage? That when data would be traveling in this frequency band, there would be less signal interruption. But what would be the disadvantages? The speed of this would be very less. Today's wireless networks are built primarily on the low band spectrum, and the wireless industry has used this spectrum to build high speed wireless networks that cover 99.7% of Americans, which means that in today's internet connectivity, primary band that is used is the low band spectrum, the lower frequency range, where there is less signal interruption but the speed is not that high. The next band is the mid band spectrum, which would be, if under 3 gigahertz is the low band, between 3 gigahertz and 24 gigahertz is the mid band spectrum. Now this is between the low band and the high band spectrum, that is where the mid band, it blends the characteristics of both low and high band spectrum. So what is the characteristic of high band spectrum? Let's see, which is above 24 gigahertz. So if the waves are traveling in this high frequency band, it gives extreme amount of speeds for the data transmission. This has been the addition of the 5G network, where such high band frequencies would be provided and data would be transmitted. So it travels much shorter distances, right, compared to low band spectrum, but offers high capacity and ultra fast speeds. So what is the advantage in high band spectrum? That the speed of the data would be very high, but there can be the distances that the data is traveling short, and there can be signal damages to that. And the mid band spectrum which we saw will mix both these qualities. So the auction that is happening has certain bands in the low band spectrum, has one band in the high band spectrum, and certain bands in the mid band spectrum that the telecom operators would be buying from the auction. So this is the backdrop of how the auction works. What exactly do we mean when we say 5G spectrum auction is happening? So with this auction now, the government was set to earn 90,000 crore rupees. And how much has it earned on day one itself? 1.45 lakh crore. So government obviously has exceeded its expectations, and it is expected that more companies will buy the bands and 5G services will roll out in the coming September and October months. So this was a discussion with related to the 5G spectrum auction. Let's move to our next article. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, India adds 5 more Ramsar sites. Now this article is of utmost importance from our environment point of view, because the concept of wetlands and Ramsar sites are often in news and of importance in the examination. So this becomes important for us from the examination from the syllabus point of view of GS3, where we study environment, and from the prelims perspective as well. Now the news is saying that 5 more Ramsar sites are added. So we'll take a look at what exactly are Ramsar sites, what are wetlands, what do we mean when some wetlands are added into the Ramsar sites. We'll take a look at all this. So first of all, what do we mean by a wetland? So a wetland, first of all, are ecosystems saturated with water, either seasonally or permanently. So these are marshy lands, what we generally called as, these are lands saturated with water. They include mangroves, marshes, rivers, lakes, deltas, floodplains and flooded forests, rice fields, coral reefs, marine areas no deeper than 6 meters at low tide, as well as human-made wetlands such as the wastewater treatment ponds and reservoirs. So wetlands are nothing but those water bodies which have the keyword is saturated with water, which would mean that either flowing water or stagnant water. So this would mean that this ecosystem which is saturated with water has increased amount of nutrients for the water body, and it can be a very good ground for the birds to come and feed on. So therefore the migratory birds come and feed in these wetlands. So therefore these places become of extreme importance. So what is the significance of this wetlands? They are critical part of our natural environment because they mitigate floods. If mangroves are a part of wetland, mangroves play a big role in mitigating the cyclones, taking care of the floods, protect coastlines and build community resilience to disasters and reduce the impact of floods, absorb pollutants and improve water quality. We know that when the water is saturated, it absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide, it becomes a carbon sink, therefore it absorbs pollutants and it improves water quality. Wetlands are critical to human and planet life. More than 1 billion people depend on them for a living, and 40% of the world's species live and breed in wetlands. They are a vital source for food, raw materials, genetic resources for medicine and hydropower as well. And 30% of land-based carbon is stored in peatland, or what we call wetland. They play an important role in the transport, tourism and cultural and spiritual well-being of people as well, right? These sites become important tourist spots and cultural spots, and many wetlands are areas of natural beauty and many are important to Aboriginal people. So we established the importance of wetlands and what exactly are wetlands. So we understand that these are important sites. Alright, so now what do we mean by Ramsar sites? So Ramsar sites is nothing but the Ramsar convention was held in the city of Ramsar. This is a city in Iran. Now international players and countries got together and decided that these wetlands around the world are very important. So we will make an agreement to protect these wetlands. So the Ramsar convention was signed, which was to identify such wetlands, that the important wetlands around the world would be identified and designated as Ramsar wetlands of international importance. So once they would be designated as Ramsar sites or recognized as important wetlands in this Ramsar convention, they would get certain recognition and increased protection would be given for the conservation of these wetlands. So those wetlands which come under the Ramsar list become the Ramsar sites. That is the significance of a wetland having to be known as a Ramsar site. So it is an intergovernmental treaty that provides the framework for national action and international cooperation for the conservation and wise use of the wetlands and their resources. When we say wise use, the convention enumerates a lot of practices which says that the wetlands should be used in a very sustainable and efficient manner to ensure their wise use. So that is the concept of Ramsar convention and Ramsar sites. Now if we come to India, there are up until today there were 49 Ramsar sites in India as of May 2022, and as this article now will say that 5 more sites are added. So these are the sites in the map which show the wetland Ramsar, not the whole wetlands, right? Only the Ramsar wetland sites in India, which are now 49 plus 5, 54 total wetland sites that we have. And which are the new 5 that have been added? 3 are from Tamil Nadu, the Karikili Bird Sanctuary, the Palikaranai Marsh Reserve Forest, and the Pichavaram Mangrove in Tamil Nadu, and the Sakhya Sagar in MP, and the Pala Wetlands in Mizoram. So 3 are from Tamil Nadu, 1 is from MP, and 1 is from Mizoram. You can comment me in the comment box below which state has the highest number of Ramsar sites. You can refer to the map. So this makes now the total number of Ramsar sites as 54 for us in India. And so when we say that some wetlands are there in the Ramsar list and some are not, so according to ISRO, the data for this is that the total area of wetlands in India, right, all that we saw as wetlands, rivers, floodplains, marshy lands, deltas, that is around 1,52,000 52,600 square kilometer. So this is the total area of wetlands in the country. But how many of they are Ramsar wetlands? 11,000 square kilometer of them are Ramsar sites or Ramsar wetlands which have specialized protection. So this can be the comparison for us, that this is the total area for wetlands and this is the total area under the Ramsar sites or under the international protection. So when we say that some wetlands do get a status of Ramsar site, so what exactly do they get? What is the significance of this Ramsar listing? It is like a certification. What do we mean by certification? That there are certain conditions that the Ramsar Convention enumerates, that if you want to enlist a wetland as a Ramsar site, it must fulfill certain conditions, that it is a site of certain area, it is housing migratory birds which travel from long distances of continents and houses those birds. So once these conditions are satisfied, the wetland is designated as a Ramsar site. And if those conditions at any point stop being met by the wetland, then that wetland would be taken out from the list. So this works as a standard setting authority, and it gives idea that this wetland is being managed well. Then this Ramsar tag makes it incumbent upon authority to strengthen the protection regime there and also creates defenses against encroachment, right? If we designate any site of international importance, it creates obligation upon the authority to protect that site, as well as it would protect it from encroachment from other activities. And obviously the main thing is that you get funding, which is not so significant, but funding is provided under the Ramsar Convention, and the important thing that one gets is that of visibility, right? International recognition gives visibility, which increases the tourist activity in that region. So that becomes of importance, and wetlands in India act as a foraging and resting grounds for the migratory birds during winter. So these the migratory birds which travel months and months and land in these wetlands become of utmost importance for these birds. So this was the discussion with respect to the wetlands, the 5 more sites that are added, and what exactly is the difference between Ramsar site, what are wetlands, and the other provisions. So with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, 19 Rajya Sabha members suspended in one go. Now this article becomes important because it is talking about the parliament, the Council of States, the one house of the parliament, and questions on parliament in preliminary examination are being seen every year. Every year 1 or 2 questions from the concept of parliament always features in the examination. So this becomes important for us from the examination point of view from GS2 plus prelims. So in this case, we study a lot of aspects of parliament, that is Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. But in this particular article, we talk about a particular aspect of suspension of MPs, as to what exactly are the conditions in which the MPs can be suspended, who has the power to do so. So that would be our point of discussion. So what has happened? The monsoon session for the parliament is going on right now, as we know, and in this yesterday during this session, a lot of ruckus was being created by certain MPs, and those 19 MPs are now being suspended from the Rajya Sabha. And what would mean by their suspension? That they would not be able to attend the whole session that is to be carried out, that is the monsoon session to be carried out in the next few weeks. So talking about the suspension. Now the general principle is that the role and duty of the presiding officer. Who is the presiding officer? In case of the Lok Sabha, he is known as the speaker, and in case of the Rajya Sabha, he is known as the chairman. Who is the ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha? Vice President, right? So Vice President becomes the presiding officer of Rajya Sabha. Up until now, we used to see Venkaiah Naidu presiding on over Rajya Sabha. So he is the Vice President, and he is therefore also the chairman of Rajya Sabha. So it's the general principle to maintain order so that the house can function smoothly. And in order to ensure that proceedings are conducted in the proper manner, the speaker or chairman is empowered to force a member to withdraw from the house. So in order to make sure that there is order in the house, both the speaker of the Lok Sabha and chairman of the Rajya Sabha have been given certain powers to ensure this order, and if any member of the parliament is not adhering to the rules of the house, he can be asked to withdraw or be suspended also in rare cases. So what is the power? The power is granted. Now the question can come whether the MPs can be suspended under provisions of the constitution. So that would be a wrong statement. The provisions to suspend the MPs is not mentioned in the constitution, but under the general rules of procedure of the Rajya Sabha. We know that the certain parent provisions with respect to the parliament are enumerated in the constitution, and the parliament has the power to frame certain specific and detailed rules based on the constitutional provisions. So those detailed rules are mentioned in the general rules of procedure. So there are two sets, one is for the Lok Sabha and one is for the Rajya Sabha. So the general rules of procedure of the Rajya Sabha mentions this power, where the rule 255 and rule 256 pertain to suspension of the MP. So 255 gives the power to the chairman to direct any member whose conduct in his opinion is grossly disorderly to withdraw immediately from the council, and any member so ordered to withdraw shall do so forthwith and shall absent himself during the remainder of the day's meeting. So what does rule 55 grant a power to the chairman? That if there is any person who in the opinion of the chairman is behaving disorderly, for the remaining day that person can be asked to sit out. This is a classroom version of asking a student to get out of the class, right? So this is the rule 255 which says so. And what is rule 256? Rule 256 talks about the concept of suspension for member, whereas 255 provides for lesser punishment. 256 says that the chairman may, if he deems fit it necessary, suspend a member from the service of the council for a period not exceeding the remainder of the session. So the maximum period for which a member can be suspended is the remainder of the session, right? So 256 gives the chairman to rule over that. Now what is the difference between the powers of Lok Sabha speaker and the chairman of Rajya Sabha? The difference is that the speaker in this case is more powerful, where the speaker has discretion to decide whether the member should be suspended or not. Does the chairman not have the discretion to decide? The chairman does not have the discretion to decide whether suspension can be granted, and the suspension can only happen once a motion for the same is promulgated in the parliament. Let's understand the difference. When we say the speaker in Lok Sabha, the chairman of Rajya Sabha is empowered under 255 to direct any member in his opinion to withdraw immediately. This we saw. And unlike the speaker, however, the Rajya Sabha chairman does not have the power to suspend a member. But just now we saw that rule 56 provided for suspension. So what is the difference? The difference is that in case of the Rajya Sabha, a certain member has to promulgate a motion first in the Rajya Sabha, and once that motion is voted upon by the majority of the members and then the votes are in the favor of suspension of the members, then is when the suspension happens and the chairman can order a suspension. So this is the difference. The speaker has the express power to order suspension, and the chairman has the power to order suspension on the basis of a motion that is passed in the Rajya Sabha. So that is the difference. So what is the procedure? The chairman may name a member who disregards the authority and abuses the rule of the council, and in such situation the house may adopt a motion. So motion needs to be adopted suspending the member from the service of the house for a period of not exceeding the remainder of the session, right? This we saw. And what about bringing the member back? So in a similar manner, the house may by another motion terminate the suspension as well. If the house feels that the suspension is enough and the members need to be brought back, a similar motion can be used to bring them back as well. So this was the important provision and discussion with respect to the suspension of MPs in the Rajya Sabha especially, and how the powers of the chairman of Rajya Sabha and speaker differ in this manner. So with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. Now the next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Rare Flight of Antarctic's Light-Mantled Albatross to Tamil Nadu intrigues researchers. Now why have we taken this article? This article is of much importance to see because a very rare bird, that is the light-mantled albatross, This is the light-mantled albatross, which belongs to Antarctic region, and it has never been seen in the Indian coastline, but it has been first sighted in the Tamil Nadu region, that is the Rameshwaram city. On the coast of Rameshwaram, this bird has been sighted, and therefore it has intrigued the researchers a lot as to what are the reasons by which this bird is seen over here. So, where is this bird being sighted? So, in Tamil Nadu region, where we have the Rameshwaram, at the coast of this city, the bird has been sighted, and the region where it is sighted is known as the Gulf of Mannar Marine National Park. Right? This is where the bird has been sighted. So, this national park also becomes important, and it's a special national park, which means that which is a marine national park, where marine national parks are those areas where a significant area is surrounded by water, and the ecosystem is different from a normal national park and is heavily dominated by water as its main component. So, that is the speciality of marine national park. So, the article says that what is the reason that this bird, which belongs to the Antarctic and usually migrates to other places, is now being seen in India. So, the researchers are attributing this to the concept of climate change. How is this attributed to climate change? Is because when the temperature of the world changes, the winds also get impacted, and these migratory birds are known to fly long distances, wherein they do not make use of their feathers much, and they move in the direction of wind, where the wind is moving. And due to the changes in temperatures, the winds are also changing due to global warming, and the changing winds is changing the direction of these migratory birds, which is a big indication of the things to come and the changes that are being seen in the world as a whole. So, that is how this article becomes important, and the location we've seen. So, one can now this particular location map can be important, where this is the areas of Gulf of Mannar. The location of Gulf of Mannar becomes important, the Pork Bay becomes important, and Pork Strait. Now, what is a strait? A strait is a narrow water body, distancing two larger water bodies. So, if this is a narrow water body distancing two larger water bodies, this is known as a strait. So, this is the Pork Strait, and below it is the Gulf of Mannar, and above it is the Bay of Bengal, right. So, that is Pork Strait, and the locations of these water bodies become quite important. So, this was a discussion with respect to this article. We finish here, and we will meet again tomorrow with the important articles for the day. Thank you.